Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this episode is very important for us because we will discuss on climate change, its impact and responsibilities and many interesting aspects. We will learn from our world famous speaker, Professor Fred Philip, Professor Viva, Mr. James Eid, and our strong and always supportive professor, Professor Donald. So I want to start from Professor Fred Philip. How do you want to analyze today's topic? And most important thing is that I know that you are also behind the scene. You are also supporting World Talent Economy Forum with your Tando. Here, Asia Pacific people love to know more about Tando and your initiative on climate change.
Okay, thank you, Sharif. Well, let me start with climate change because there's so much to say about it. And if I get too windy here, just cut me off because I want to give everyone a chance to speak as you do. Um, I must start by saying that this is a very serious problem. And there are people in denial about it. And certainly if you if you choose the time scale of the data to support your presupposed conclusion, you can come to either conclusion you want. That climate change is a serious problem, that it's not a serious problem, that it's anthropogenic, that it is not man-made. Uh, I tend to believe that it is a serious problem and that a very significant fraction of the problem is man-made. Um, there's something that's both makes the problem worse, but also gives us opportunities, and that is that there's a terrific diversity of geographic conditions around this planet, and I mean difference in the hydrology, the soils, the weather patterns, and so on, and also huge diversity in human practices in terms of farming, manufacturing, herding, and all the things that people do. So I just got a report the other day from Shanghai Chiao Tung University, and it complains that there is no global climate observational system, no grand database of climate conditions. And yes, I can see how this is a problem, but we don't yet know what questions to ask. And so it may be premature to compile such a database. There's still very ample opportunity for ad hoc data mining, as I told the data mining conference in Beijing last fall. So besides having catalogs, I'll make it plural then, of climate conditions, we also need catalogs of the human practices that go on with go along with the different geographic areas, and the catalogs of the different ameliorative actions that people in these regions have taken, because what works in one region may very well work in another, and we need to be able to exchange ideas and embrace the diversity that could hold the clues to a solution, rather than do some kind of top-down, one-size-fits-all thing. Now, of course, a one-size-fits-all geoengineering measure might be, a last-ditch practice, an emergency last-ditch attempt to save the world, but
Hail Mary fast.
we hope not. So I wonder. I wonder, very importantly, what kind of economic and governance system is going to help us. In a democracy, people are not going to vote for the hardships that it's going to cause to reverse climate change, and the autocratic governments that we see around the world right now tend to indulge in denigrating science and denial about climate change. So what, whether we need a new economic system or just massive government incentives for companies to do the right thing, uh, this remains to be answered. So um, I'll reserve other comments for later on, but I hate to say that something like a database is premature or that we don't know the answer about the economic system because we're already very late in the game. And to say that we'll decide some things later, uh, well, we probably shouldn't do that when we don't absolutely have to. Finally, I just want to say that one of the side effects of this is going to be intergenerational strife. I came of age during the Vietnam War era, and I tell you, we loved our parents, but we were very angry with our parents for putting us and their children, and not to mention all the Vietnamese, in such a terrible situation. Now, if we were angry with our parents about that, you can imagine how angry our children are going to be with us, and already are angry with us for basically destroying the world. And we'll talk about more of the side effects of climate change later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fred Philip. Professor Viva, how do you want to analyze today's topic, and what interesting views you want to share with us?
Okay, hopefully a couple of different ones. I'd just like to echo what Fred mentioned about the political world. As a technology company looking for funding, we've had to watch the political scene to see where there are politicians that are actually governing the wealth of either the nation or the world at the international level. And we're always looking for ways that we can help remove barriers to doing what actually needs to be done. And I'm sure most of us will agree at this point that we have to start pulling greenhouse gases back out of the atmosphere in order to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius targets. So I think, it needs to be aired that we have to urge politicians to exercise their powers. They're the only fulcrum, the financial fulcrum on which we can leverage making sure there is enough wealth delegated to the climate change problem. So we all have to really, look at pushing hard for new politicians that have platforms that are very green. I know some of you will be aware that in Canada, the Green Party already is this type of political party, and they are creating politicians who are very strong on the climate portfolio and emergency. But for some reason, Canadians aren't getting behind it as much as I would have anticipated. So we need the civil society people to, hold hands and get together on the furthering of parties like the Green Party, and policies similar in all the other parties need to be strongly reinforced as quickly as possible, because it's the last barrier when we're talking about how the money is allocated in society towards the needs of the society. So I just want people to know that that's what we have found with our team, that is a huge barrier to shifting resources into solving the climate crisis. The other point that I'll just introductorily make is that we've also tried to look at what is going on with the climate deniers. And we just think that in any realm of information. There are people that are just always going to be more handicapped than everyone else. So we just sort of relegate the climate denier to being scientifically handicapped. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, it's important to pay attention to where they are on the spectrum and see if you can help them along. But it is, a cumulative knowledge journey, and some people aren't capable of taking on the facts that are presented to them, and can get emotional and negatively biased towards taking on the facts that are presented. So those are just two introductory comments I'd like to make. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor Vibha. Professor David Smith, how do you want to analyze today's topic, and what are the interesting fact, figures, and information you want to share with our audience?
Thank you so much for hosting this on this really important topic. Climate change is part history, part science, part political, as we've all said, and is also a cyclical event. If you go back and look at records from hundreds and thousands of years ago. So we're going through these types of changes. Part of the question is has man accelerated climate change? And the scientific explanation says yes. But we've also seen places where we accelerated in the past too, and have seen real extremes going through it. Part of my view as we look at climate change is part of dealing with climate change is education. And how do we put education in place that gets to the nuances of the climate change as well as the global issues of the climate change? There's an interesting site that I had looked at probably last year that says it's the 100 indicators of climate change or something like that. And the nuances are real interesting, in that the fact that we're going through and we're cutting down so many forests, that is a thing that has caused some significant climate change. The fact that as we look at how storms have evolved and how the water flows have changed, that has changed considerable climate change as well. So it's one of those elements where you've heard me use the term too many times. It's a complex system, and climate change is the epitome of a complex system because of all the nuances of what can happen to it. 2017 was the highest level of CO2 in the atmosphere since the 1800s. But the CO2 level actually has been going down. NASA talked for a long time about the holes in the ozone above the poles. Well, those holes in the ozone are getting smaller. And so we're seeing things happening. The challenge is the pace of change. And the challenge is working globally on how to deal with that pace of change. Because what you see with the pace of change is where one country might get better, then another country gets worse. You see different ways where even how we deal with our food supply has an impact on climate change. So my first analysis for you on climate change is it's a subject that is so complex that simple solutions cannot solve the problem, and that we've got to really work broader across the systems approach to have a significant impact on dealing with climate change. But that's, I think, is my first analysis.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Donald, how do you want to analyze today's topic? Unmute, please.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things I want to say, kind of bouncing off of what other people said. I really appreciate what Fred was saying, because he took a very scientific way of looking at it. It's not as cut and dried. For instance, there's recently NASA the last week showed from their satellite data, and which they verified with the Argo floats, which are a way that we can measure the temperature in the ocean. We found that the energy balance of the world since 2005 has basically doubled in the amount of heat that we're holding, doubled. But scientists are not willing to say that that's from anthropomorphic human-caused climate, human-caused things like greenhouse gases and other kinds of things, because they need a longer time scale. They need more data. They're not willing to make a commitment to what's going on without studying it in great detail. Some people say that it's just natural cycles, but the problem with that is that there has to be some sort of what they call forcing, some sort of something that's causing that heat to happen. And they don't have an explanation for why, because the solar cycle is actually declining right now, not increasing. However, the idea that these gases, greenhouse gases, and the subsequent water vapor, because cloud cover is decreasing and ice is decreasing, which both reflect back into the atmosphere. But water vapor itself is increasing, which is the most powerful greenhouse gas. It's not a gas, but the most powerful source of trapping solar radiation. I just checked what that, and the CO2 is not declining. It's actually increased quite a bit since 2017. In 2019, they were the highest levels ever, and it hasn't been declining. It's been steadily going up. I'll give a source for that. It's a good source. Whether we believe that humans cause it or not, well, that's an important issue, because if humans are causing it, then humans can do something to help mitigate it. And if we don't agree on the source of what's going on, then we're not going to agree on the potential solutions. And we talked about that people are not well enough educated about it. There's various kinds of things, but we have to understand this. Like, this issue of science talk is you might want to get it. It's completely dedicated to the issue of basically climate migration. And the city of Jakarta right now is dealing with the low-lying people being inundated to such a degree that they're talking about relocating one of the biggest cities in the world. And they know something has to be done. It's a complicated issue. But just like it's easy to understand that people in the developing world have been taken over by the developed world. They've stolen their resources. They've basically almost enslaved the people. And we did it in India. We did it all over the world. We did it in the Philippines. We've done it, everywhere. The developed world has dominated the developing world. And within the United States, there's a similar thing that goes on, because the people who've got their college degrees, which is about a third of the people in America, are have higher social status, because in our society we come to we if somebody went to Harvard, they must be smart, they must be hardworking, they must be better than everyone else, and they think they're better than everyone else too. It's one of these things that in human psychology, when things happen to us by luck, we have a tendency to take credit for what happened. Like we say, yeah, we caused that, even though it was luck. And there's a huge amount of luck in going to Harvard, because half the people that go to Harvard's parents are in the top 1% of the economic strata in the United States. So there's a tendency for people that are on the lower end of the strata, whether it's people that have been dominated by colonialism, or it's people that are basically looked down on for their jobs, whatever they happen to be, garbage collector, carpenter, they're looked down on. So when we tell them, hey, you're a moron, you don't understand climate change, you don't understand science, you're a complete, you're stupid. It's easy for them to want to be able to go to some place that builds them up and makes them feel better. And this is offered to people. Some of them are unscrupulous, where they're just, like doing focus groups and figuring out what they can tell these people that they're willing to believe. But they're very willing to take a stand that opposes the basically people in power. And I'll leave it at that, but I want to get back to that, because that provides a huge problem in us being able to mitigate it, whether it's moving cities or using less carbon or all those kinds of things. We've got a huge barrier because of the social structure that we've developed.
Thank you. Mr. Jamsid, how do you want to analyze today's topic?
Thank you, Sharif. Great topic. Loved what I've heard so far. And as far as my political awareness goes, it was also defined by the Vietnam era. I carried a sign that said, "Make love, not war," before I had done either one of them. So I think that the youth can take a leadership position in solving these problems. We felt at that age that we could make a change in society. And I don't see that confidence in a lot of people that are young today. And I want to tell them you can do it. If you have confidence in yourself, you don't have to give up. You can make change. You can make change in your society. And it's going to be up to you, because the mess that we're leaving you, you're going to have to clean up. So get started. And I mean, get started yesterday. But we can't do anything about yesterday. So get started today. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And we brought up the thing of climate change deniers. And, the people that yes, it's the source of education. Yes, it's a lack of information. However, there's a lot of people that are doing their work. Let's say, just pick it out of my hat. The construction workers, they're working. They can't watch television. They can't be reading a newspaper while they're doing their work, but they can be listening to the radio. And so many right-wing type of thinkers have caught on to that, and they caught on to that decades ago. And so they have a lot of entertaining people telling them that climate change is a joke, or it's something that people are using to take away your jobs. And they're giving you some place to place your anger, to some place to misdirect where your anger should be directed towards. So this right-wing radio has had a powerful effect on a large group of the population. These people aren't idiots, but very clever people have found a way to reach them. And so it is a question of information, it is a question of education, but you've got to be smart about how you reach them. And if you're not, you never will. and they'll still be voting for a narcissistic pathological liar, because the funny people who are clever and are misdirecting their anger will be the ones they're listening to. So let's wake up, do a better job of reaching these people. And then there's also the people that say, yeah, climate change has existed. It's existed all throughout history. And so it will happen before mankind. It will happen after mankind. Yes, that's true, but it's begging the question. Has man have something to do with it? And the answer is yes. Since the dawn of the industrial age, man has been influencing the climate. In London, you have to be older than me to remember, but London had what they called pea soup fog. It was unhealthy to breathe. It was because there were factories belching pollutants into the air, and people were breathing it. People were getting sick. And we also have, people putting jobs over the future. I want a job today. I don't care what happens in the future. I can't control or predict the future. Maybe it'll all be magically solved someday, but I want a job today. And so we have miners going into the earth and getting black lung disease. So you'll sacrifice years of your life for a job today. That's not a good trade. We have to think about the future as well as today. We have to plan for it. We have to try to do better than what we've done in the past. So these things are part of the solutions, but it's going to take a lot of people. And so is it political will? Is it economic systems? Well, it's a combination of those things. What we need is dynamic leadership. And it may be just one person in one country, but I would prefer it to be many people in many countries. Dynamic leadership, people will follow. So what we need is leadership. And what we're lacking is leadership. There's plenty of bright minds working on these problems today, but without the leadership, we will not affect change. Sharif, thank you again for having me on your wonderful show.
Thank you. Professor Fred Philip. One of the important thing is that as we have to think about lot of solution for climate change, specifically we are from Asia Pacific. There are many developing nations. As a professor, you also contribute a lot in Asia Pacific and many developing nations. But my question is that when we have to change, let's say our energy sector, we have to move with this green energy, let's say our healthcare sectors or our smart city projects or many technology, we have to move according to sustainable development goals and many interesting things. And it may need lot of investment and other things in that particular area, because as I also involved with these developing nations and we are observing, and regularly we are getting a lot of even projects and case and other things, developing nations struggle a lot to implement this sustainable development goal or changing their different project strategy and implementing this green technology. So what will be the best approach for developing nations government, like country like Indonesia, Vietnam, example, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India? What is your guideline?
Oh, each will have its own problems. I mentioned before the diversity of conditions and human practices in these, but a few observations. The government of China, I believe, is extremely serious about ameliorating climate change. They're devoting a lot of money to science grants at their various universities and national institutes. However, politics gets in the way. In principle, I have a lab at the Fred Phillips lab at the Chinese Academy of Sciences at the Institute for Geographic Science and Natural Resources. And they're supposed to be working, my graduate students there, on mapping the trade-offs among the development goals, the sustainable development goals. And there are positive synergies as well as negative trade-offs among even the sustainable development goals that have to do with climate. And there are some, it's obvious, I think, that if you advance one of the goals and that necessarily retards another one of the goals, that priority attention ought to be given to reducing those trade-offs, reducing the magnitude of those negative trade-offs. I think we all agree, and forgive me if I repeat some things that have been said while my connection was bad, but we cannot solve this problem with the technologies that we have today. We need to innovate, and we need to invest in scientific research, and we need to invest in sharing information both among the technology leader countries and the technology follower countries. So the thing is, I have not heard any progress reports from, I'll make finger quotes here, my lab at the Chinese Academy, despite my many inquiries. And of course, I've not been able to go there because of the pandemic. So there must be something political going on that discourages people in China from sharing that information overseas. Now, China's military buildup might mean that they're also thinking, what if this doesn't work? What if we need to have, armed initiatives if climate change results in resource shortages? So all the threats that threaten humanity's survival interact with each other. Climate-driven migration is going to crowd people together and cause more epidemics. Climate-driven resource shortages may very well cause wars. And you're asking what the Southeast Asian countries can do. It's so different. Indonesia needs, and they know it, to stop this deforestation for the strip mining, because that's the primary source of environmental degradation and atmospheric pollution from there. Tibet needs to worry about reduced snowfall. And China worries about the reduced snow runoff from the Himalayas. And the problems are so varied. I'm going to talk about the United States first. We'll get back to Asia. Here in the South United States, we've got an unprecedented heat wave. Today, the weather's moderating a bit. It's changed from way, way too hot to simply way too hot. And there will be some relief at the end of the week. But New Mexico, the state is a leader in direct atmosphere capture of CO2, and we have places to put the CO2. Deep salt aquifers, saline aquifers, and abandoned oil wells are all places to pack gigatons of CO2. So Asia will need to see whether you have any of those geologic features that, and then cooperate with universities and national laboratories in other countries to advance the technology of direct air capture of CO2 and other mechanisms for capturing CO2. Okay, as far as leadership, I do have details of President Biden's new climate change policy. We can go into that later if there's time, but there's one topic that I find my Asian audiences have a hard time because it's a distinctly American and also Brazilian phenomenon that is just so bizarre. Sorry, what?
Yes, please continue.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I'm talking about the evangelical phenomenon. You know, there are huge parts of the electorate in both the United States and Brazil that who believe that the rapture will come and all good Christians will be elevated to heaven and leave the earth behind. And this belief means that they're not concerned with environmental are, but because the number two problem.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you,
I'll
Professor.
stop there for now.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Because, yes, Professor Viba, I want to bring another point for you because you are a scientist as you also have contribution for climate change. We are sharing your organizations and you are doing excellent work. Always as World Talent Economy Forum, we have to work with industry as well as different organizations. What actually Professor Fred Philip bring in this discussion, very important. We need to invest a lot of money for research and development, especially innovating the new products. We need a lot of investment. For my understanding, as I have some collaboration with corporations, we need to create more awareness to the corporations how they can invest more money for research and development, like your research, like Professor Fred Phillips and Professor David Smith. They are doing fantastic work. So this kind of research, we also create this awareness to the Asia Pacific and especially developing nations corporations. Let's focus on research and innovations. And Professor Fred Philip also bring this point. So what should be the
Okay.
best way to to create more awareness to these entrepreneurs, these corporations, this government to
Mm.
invest on research and innovation? And other things I just want to add, because if I'm wrong you will correct me, but there is one of the vibe inside the much community that they thinks that okay, scientists are not doing enough, we are doing whatever we are doing, this is our jobs. So how we can create more awareness this much community? No, scientific people, those who are scientists, they are also developing lot of things for our developments. So what is your analysis, because you have practical explanation and everything?
Yeah, we have experience with funding opportunities and actually being missed a significant number of times for different reasons. And as far as the large businesses, the answer I have for them is to just step out and offer incentives in a way that makes sense to you. And also, don't fear being called out for greenwashing. It's time for us to step out and innovate, period, and leave it at that. This for the sake of innovating for the benefit of humanity without, a second cuckolding against people or businesses that offer incentives and telling them that they're greenwashing. I think we need to be careful about that and police ourselves a little more carefully about that, because it's discouraging them from stepping out and innovating. And a good example of someone who has done this is Elon Musk. He offers now $100 million X prize for carbon removal. Now, this is, it's pretty rare, but, there are middle grounds as well where businesses can team up with universities and give them an endowment that's focused on a specific research area. So the businesses can do that as well. And then they're assured that there is some academic quality involved in the innovative work. And it's often done that way in Canada as well, too. So, but I just want to put put out one other cautionary thing about the intelligentsia of the world. Okay, the smart people, the people who have had a scholarship ride into a secure job, even if they're an earth scientist or different types of scientists that all have a small view of the data that is showing climate change, we have to remember that they are still failing us on the climate change situation because it hasn't fully shifted yet. So I just want to urge the intelligentsia to understand that alarmism is no longer an excuse or a pressure to keep you quiet. Um, we're far beyond that now, and we need to have that openly said, that alarmism and not being an activist as a member of the intelligentsia is harming humanity and the future that we're trying to control. So just so that I think it was Donald was saying, or one of the other speakers that's not on the screen right now, that there aren't technologies that can actually treat climate change. We do have one here that we are proposing will do it because it's a hydroxyl dispersal, and hydroxyl removes all greenhouse gases, including CO2. It is a known water-based sorbent of CO2. It just has to connect up with a mineral in the atmosphere, and then it will become a carbonate, which is a permanent sequestration of CO2. So we know that there's about 60 to 70 ppm of carbonate minerals that are floating around in the atmosphere at any one given time that can be involved in making sure that CO2 is removed. It's not a full CO2 targeted technology. It does all the greenhouse gases all at once. And we also know that about 78 parts per million CO2 equivalents are warming the earth, and they're not CO2 gases. They are all of the synthetic greenhouse gases, the short-lived climate pollutants, and methane that makes up that difference. So we have to remember that even though everybody is looking at 419 and going up ppm for CO2, we have another 78 ppm CO2 equivalents of the other greenhouse gases that certainly would help by being removed. It would definitely cool the planet down. Now, the paradigm that we have is that we're removing the heat blocking gases out of the way so that heat can escape. Okay, so the solar radiation management is blocking the sunlight from getting in, but we're opening up the atmosphere to let the heat out. So those are the different types of physics that are being, bantied about. So we think that if we can scale up to about 72 acres of working technology, and then space for power supply because it only needs electricity, that we can do a global mitigation that will really pull us back from the edge of the cliff. Okay, thanks, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor Viva. Professor David Smith, I'm sure you want to share many valuable information with us.
I love the discussion so far. I have to hit that unmute button. The research, though, if you do a high-level view of the research, it's very broad. You're able to see different stuff. One of the centers that I think has done a really good job with that is actually the Purdue Center for Climate Change. They have gone, and they even have, for example, an ongoing video competition now for other parts of, for other people to submit videos on this topic. But if you look at some of their research, they have research which says, here's what's happening in India. Here's what's happening in Greenland. Here's the last 1,000 years of climate change in Greenland, for example, and others like that, which to me begins to get about how you have to do research to understand it. Because climate change is, yes, global, but climate change is also local. And the things you do in your local environment that affect climate change can make a difference there. But you also have to see it in the aggregate again. The other thing that Purdue does really well is Purdue has a program for entrepreneurship called Discovery Park, where Discovery Park is a public-private partnership put together to bring academic research, corporate research, development together under the same roof, thereby Discovery Park, to address these type of challenges. You know, like in so many of the topics we discuss with these three, this type of collaboration is a part of the answer as we look at the type of problems we end up discussing with you, because they are those complex problems. Climate change, though, the big wild cards are the implementation of the results of the research. The regulatory environment is such that if I make a change here in Austin, it might affect my local ecosystem, but it's not going to affect the global climate situation. We've seen that changes in some countries can have an impact, but you've got to get a whole host of countries to make those same type of changes. So that's the challenge with part of the research, is how do we take and broaden the research in a way where the will of the governments go along with the research. And, you know, if we can figure that one out, whoever figures that out should be nominated for a whole string of Nobel Prizes. Mm-hmm. Because I hear this all the time. Technology's easy. Research is easy. It's the people that are hard. And in climate change, it's the same thing. We see from the research things to do. We see technology that can play and be impacted, but it's the people that is really the wild card in climate change that is the hole that we have. Mm-hmm. And I would love to let Fred or Donald tell us how to fix that.
Yes, Mr. Donald, yes, thank you.
I think everybody has agreed that one of the biggest problems is the people part of it. And interestingly, there's a huge nationalist, populist movements all over the world. It's not just taking place in the United States with that guy that lost the last election. I don't like to say his name. That's what he wants. But in any event, an interesting case in point is Germany right now. In 2018, Germany had a drought that was so serious that the Rhone River dried up, and shipping from their manufacturing plants along the river couldn't take place. The river dried up to such an extent that the traffic that usually goes on the river couldn't exist anymore. The economists said that they lost about 2% of GDP because of it. And that was 2018. That was just 3 years ago or less. And so, you would think that what would happen is that there would be a huge movement towards climate mitigation and climate change awareness. that the Green Party tanked. I mean, it's because people just don't like them. They're hectoring, they're accusing everybody of being awful and blah, 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 and they're just on and on. They drive down the street with megaphones yelling at people. That's an analogy. I know somebody that actually does that here in the United States. And it isn't working. And I want to say that in all of our discussion, there's been this subtext that we, the good, great, wonderful, educated people, are trying to figure out what to do about the great unwashed masses who have bad information and don't understand what we're talking about, and you know, they won't listen, and they're climate change deniers and all these different kinds of things. And I think we've really got to rethink that, because there's the whole idea of basically you tell people what to do, or you get people involved. And I think there's a whole theory of work, that work isn't about making money. Work is about contributing to the society around you, that you feel the status that you have and the feeling that you have of yourself is that you're contributing, you're making a difference in the world. I know, I love what Kahlil Gibran said in one of his little things that he does, I guess they're sort of poems, is he said, work is love made visible. And we need to be able to be part of the world. And so the dilemma I think that we have as, you know, highly educated people is how is it that we're going to change our thinking and be able to be more respectful and of the people. You know, we're not being respectful talking about the idea that our technology is going to solve their problems and so on like that, because ultimately people are going to have to dial back their consumerism. And we've developed an economy in a world where consumerism is the goal of the society. I mean, in other words, in a capitalist society, Adam Smith or Keynes, I forget which one of them, basically said that the goal of manufacturing and the goal of business was to be able to increase people's ability to buy stuff and have stuff. We've had people on this show that talk about how wonderful our system is, because we can, even poor people can get lots of things. And I don't know quite yet how to think about it. It's something that I'm throwing out here as an example, as something where we really do need to start thinking differently. But I will point out that societies are very different about that. Like, I was having a long conversation with a guy who was born in Mexico, moved here at 2 years old. His English is, his brother has a PhD in history. He's, you know, incredibly articulate in Spanish and English. And he also is married a German woman. So he spent a great deal of time in Germany. So he also speaks German well. And he told me that he can't wait to retire and get out of the United States and go back to Mexico, because he dislikes the culture here. The whole culture that we have is not respectful. It's a culture where we get to, you know, sit on our high horses and think of what all the other people should do. And I don't know the solution, but I do know that just starting to think about it is an important key, because, as I said, there's a Science article that was out a couple of months ago where they did some research, and they showed that just talking to people about problems and these kinds of issues, just conversations, we go out on networks. That's why we know, we're just so amazed that we went, like the time I met a guy in Japan that went to my same teeny weeny itsy bitsy little high school, 60 people in the graduating class. And there I am talking to one of my clients in Japan, and he went to the same high school. And we're just always amazed by that. But if you understand the way that social networks work, you understand that everybody that you influence is influencing other people who are influencing other people, and your reach is far, far greater than you think it is. So I think as individuals, we need to understand that, like Martin Luther King said, that a garbage man is contributing as much to society as a PhD in climate change. I mean, if they didn't have garbage men, we'd have disease and all these horrible things that would happen without garbage men. So we need as people to start rethinking our values, and it's not, the United States is not a good model for that. There are other countries in the world where people value each other and understand, and so the ultimate goal is contributive morality. So people are contributing to feel that they're contributing to what we do, instead of being told, you need to use less of this and you need to use less of that. You're a bad person and we're really smart and we know what you should do. It isn't going to work. So I'm throwing that out there more than saying that I have the solution.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jamsit.
Well, I don't know if I should be angry or proud that Donald said what I'm trying to say in such a more articulate way. Yeah, this is it in a nutshell. Don't scold, don't blame, don't point the finger. Everybody's in this together. And you start with yourself. Do the work on your own value systems. Do the work on how you can change your behavior so that what you're doing does not harm the planet, because we're all in this planet together. And then you can influence your sphere of influence, and then who knows where that will stop. You can influence your community, and then that community can influence the next, and it can keep growing. That's so important. There's a couple of other things I want to mention is that, yes, we have the technologies, or we're developing the technologies, and what this takes is collaboration. What's interfering with this collaboration? This notion of boundaries, of borders. In nature, the borders are mountain ranges and oceans, or impassable rivers. In our atlases and globes and maps, we have artificial borders that we draw lines. These are man-made borders, and they prevent us from collaborating. So we have to change ourselves, and it's partly changing your way you think, and it's partly changing your heart. You have to change here as well as here, and you cannot tell people what to do. You can present them with options, but what's going on out there is, as the professors have been telling us, these are complicated problems, and most people don't have the attention span to listen to a complicated problem and to think about it in terms of how would I solve it. So they need little more bite-sized pieces, and this is what the right-wing talk radio is focusing on. So sound bites. So we've become a country of sound bites with no attention span. And these video games that we're playing just reinforce that. It's just, we don't have the attention span that we used to have. We used to have to think and then do something and pay attention to what we were doing. But if you're a factory worker or a construction worker or something like that, you can't read a newspaper while you're working, let alone a research paper. And you can't watch television while you're working. Your supervisor wouldn't allow that, but you can turn on the radio. And so there's little entertaining sound bites will influence the way you think. And then there's peer pressure. If you want to turn the radio to NPR, the people listening to the radio will yell at you and make you turn it back to the soundbite entertaining right-wing thinking. And they're shifting the blame. They're shifting it onto something that won't help solve these complex problems. So we've got to change our behavior. We have to compete with these little soundbite people who are shifting the blame where it does not belong and will not help solve these problems. And what does this take? This takes leadership. By going back to this, we need somebody somewhere to step up to the plate and verbalize both with the intellect and the heart what we are facing, because it is a crisis, people, and it's a crisis that we needed to address yesterday. And it's going to be too late tomorrow. So start today. And the young people, you can't go around blaming my generation for the mess we left you. That won't get you out of this. You've got to stand up, take charge, and do your part. Acquire the skill set necessary to make a difference. You can do it. There's nothing holding you back. The internet is available to you, then you can find out the information you need. But you have to go looking for it. Don't let it find you. You find it. You go and educate yourself, acquire the skill sets that you need, and then you can make a difference. And even if it is an incremental difference, if enough people make an incremental difference, it becomes a big difference. So great show, Sharif. I'm always happy to be here and to learn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jamsid. Before I go for the concluding remarks, I want to share, like we have few websites, 4 organizations actually we are working together. Al Noor Academy, Asia Research and Development Institute, World Talent Economy Forum, as well as School of Talent Economy. So I just want to introduce one of our website, because like including today's content to all of the content you can get, and it's 100% free for everyone, and it will be very, very helpful for Asia Pacific. So this Al Noor Academy, under theirs, like we have this World Talent Economy Forum. This is our Center for Research and Policy Development. We have School of Talent Economy. There are 100 of content. It's 100% free. We have Asia Research and Development Institute, and we have our Debate Academy, and we train thousands of peoples around the world for debating and these kind of things. So we need to change our community first. So for that particular issues, we believe in modern science, modern engineering, and modern technology. And I want to give special thanks to our speakers, especially like today's Professor Fred Phillip, Professor David Smith, Professor Viva, Mr. James Ead, Mr. Dave Donalds. All of them are actually very, very, very helpful for World Talent Economy Forum. How you contribute for World Talent Economy Forums, it will be very helpful for us, and we will ensure your contribution will change millions of people's life, because whatever we have grassroots level relationship, we will help them. We are distributing them different countries, even prime minister of his country like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, even Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, even New Zealand prime ministers. She also email us and congratulate us for our World Talent Economy Forum initiative. Even United Arab Emirates, all of them actually taking our initiative very seriously, and we are actually sharing our content as much as possible. And those who joined today, all of you are highly influential professor from the intellectual community as well as from the corporate sector. So your support for World Talent Economy Forum is very, very important. So share our content, share in between your communities, and we will do our best. And thank you everyone for your continuous support. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I want to start from Professor Viva.
Okay, this has been a really great discussion. I feel honored to be with everybody with such high quality remarks and thinking. Something that came to mind when everybody got together on, where are we headed? And I think we have to actually do some contingency planning in civil society with more ordinary people, and also have a dialogue between different strata of society about a problem around an end time resource grab. I think that if we open up a discussion about what that might look like, And a lot of things will come to mind with people, especially in the Western civilization, because the COVID-related toilet paper grab, I think, jolted everybody into a little bit of reality around resource issues. And I think it's something that we need to come to grips with politically. We need politicians that are saying, okay, as we go forward and this actually escalates and climate change accelerates, what are we doing about resources? If we don't talk about it, then we're going to leave the door open for chaos and more war. Now, we already have resource issues in pockets of the world that are related to climate change around drought. And we have relief agencies in there that are modeling for us what we should be thinking about in terms of sharing and, international generosity. So I would point to those models when it comes to this. Concern about, a possible end time resource grab. I do think that everybody needs to confront it so that we can direct our leadership to do the contingency planning necessary. We are definitely at post peak resources for humanity, and we're on the downslide in terms of resources. We all know that now. So I think we actually have to have open discussions about how our political landscape is going to change. And it's going to have to globalize. And, the lesson from the atmosphere is there's one atmosphere. And it's the same thing for us. There is one humanity. So I would just like to leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent, Professor Viva. Professor Fred Philip. Professor Fred, can you hear me?
Sharif, why don't you go with David now?
Yes, Professor David.
Sharif, I really appreciate you having me be part of such an important topic. The future of our children's children is really what's at stake as we address these issues. And it's going to take the commitment of multiple generations to be able to solve this problem. So it goes beyond our individual intent. It goes beyond the intent of our research institutions and the NGOs and others. And it's a large-scale problem that will be a generational solution to address with it. I think the biggest thing that we have to do to address this is kind of like what Vito said, is we have a finite resource that we have to deal with. And it doesn't respect borders. And because of that, we really need to look at how to bring a collaborative approach in place that can address the entire ecosystem of the concerns with this. So the academic, the research, the manufacturing, the agricultural, the environmental pieces, and yes, the human pieces with the politics, the regulatory, and the human attention to understand the impacts. It's really hard for people who, because climate change is slow, to put it as an imperative. And so it has to pull those pieces together, because we're at a point where we're getting results, where we've put things in place to change them, like the holes in the ozone. But it's going to take more work. So it's really pulling the people together to handle this complex problem, and handle as a complex problem, not as pieces, not as parts, but as the complex problem. And when we do that, we will begin to make progress towards more accelerated paths of solving the issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Professor Fred Philip, what's your concluding remarks today? Professor Fred, can you hear me? Professor Fred.
Yeah. Yes, I hope you can hear me. The
Yes, yes.
connection is still very bad. Yes, to conclude, the diversity of conditions in Southeast Asia, some of the countries are very low-lying. Let's look at Bangladesh, which might have to anticipate a future of being largely underwater as sea levels rise. I asked a Chinese official whether his country is ready for climate refugees from Bangladesh, and his answer was very chilling. He said China has very strict border policies. Well, the policies may be strict, but we know that the border is actually as porous as Swiss cheese because we can see what's happening with the drug smuggling between Myanmar and China. So there's going to be a diplomatic problem for Bangladesh, and as well as the scientific problem. They should start negotiating their future with neighboring countries. Um, the prospects of migration into India appear rather bleak as long as Mr. Modi has his negative attitude about Muslims. So these are all things to think about in the larger migration picture, because climate change is going to cause massive migration. Again, there's diversity of approaches. Mr. Biden wants to strengthen buildings in low-lying areas of the United States. Mr. Xi in China wants to move populations away from China's coastal cities into the new cities that have been built in the interior. So will governments be able to distinguish between climate refugees and war refugees, and economic refugees, and pandemic refugees? Basically, they will not be able to make this distinction because the issues of climate, epidemic, war, and economy are so tightly linked. Migration will be one of the biggest secondary problems next to the primary problem, scientific problem of CO2 remediation itself. We might wonder why the super rich of the world are not doing more to help. Many of them are, of course, but so many are not that one could almost believe in some conspiracy theory about the super rich hoping to live in bubbles, immune to the climate change and leaving the rest of us to fry. We hope that this is not true, so there's diplomatic things to be worked out between the economic strata as well as between the countries. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Fred Philip. This is really, really important, even these COVID situations, how you're discussing about different refugees. Even from Myanmar, huge amount of refugees actually get into Bangladesh. Even climate change will be great problem for all of us. We need to work together. We need to develop better policy. That is the problem. That is the major challenges for government, every government. And I'm sure that like Professor Fred Philip, Professor Viva, Donalds, and James, everybody maybe help the developing nations, because they need to create better policy with their green technologies and other things. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks today?
Mute myself here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not muted. Hey, all right. So I want to get back to what I was saying, because when I read this book, The Tyranny of Merit, it's one of the books I've read in years that made me realize, wow, I've been wrong about some of the things I've been thinking. I mean, you know, and I consider myself a egalitarian, generous person, but I realized that in some ways I'm part of the problem. I mean, and I want to make an analogy is that here in California, there's been a huge dearth of lumber, and there's a couple of reasons for it. One of them is that that he who shall not be named, the former president, created tariffs with Canada so that the price of lumber from Canada went up quite a bit. And then there was huge fires. So thousands and tens of thousands of homes were burned, and the homes need to be rebuilt. So basically the cost of lumber is more than double. Now, does that affect you? Are you building something right now? Are you building a new fence? Well, maybe. But the people who are doing some construction, remodeling my house, it really affects them. I mean, it's huge. And pretending that I know what their problems are is, well, it's ludicrous, actually. And so every person, has the ability to contribute. I'll bet you anything, if I sat down and talked to those guys, they would have solutions that they came up with by talking to each other, being right in the middle of the problem every single solitary day. They would know ways of helping things change and get better. And I think, I remember Booker T. Washington tells the story about how a ship was sailing and that they were completely out of water and they're dying of thirst, and then they see another boat and it says, dip your well into the water and drink from that. And they didn't realize that they were at the mouth of a river where the water was actually fresh and they could drink from it. And his thing is that, you know, the idea is that everywhere there's a resource of the people with valuable knowledge and information, and we need to lower our buckets and be able to drink from that. And I think that in some ways the developing countries have an advantage because certainly Japan and the other countries, kind of the Confucius ethic, creates a lot of respect for your relationship to society itself. Like I have a Japanese friend, and when I was in Japan, there's these little statues that are about this big of rocks piled on each other with a little piece of cloth wrapped around them. And I asked, I said, well, what are those for? And he says, well, it's for luck for travelers. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. Do you guys believe that there's like magic like that will actually cause luck for travelers? No, we don't. But it's a tradition that we have, and it's a way of honoring our ancestors and honoring the society that we live in and giving credit to everyone. And when we talk about top-down autocratic approaches, like we say that it's governments that have to do this and governments that have to do that, you have to realize that governments are us, even in an autocratic situation. Remember, they were trying to, people were trying to promote what's his name, he who shall not be named, to become an autocratic leader. They wanted him to be that way. And I think it might be more complex than Fox News. It may be that Fox News is actually like pacing, not leading. Like they might be very aware of some social situations that are going on and then using that for gaining market share and the kind of power that they've gained. So I think that for every one of us, we need to start asking and stop telling. And I think that if you ask people, if you go up to somebody and you meet them and you say, hey, hi, oh, wow, what do you do? They're going to ask you what you do. And so the way to make a dialogue is to ask, not tell. And I hope that everyone will gain as much knowledge as they can about things. I believe that technology and knowledge are incredibly important, and we can work together to use that to make changes. But people are going to have to make sacrifices and do things differently and think differently. And so I think that the way to facilitate change is for all of us to become more respectful of the people around us and ask how they how they would solve the problem, how they would contribute, and listen to them because they're going to tell us things of value. So that's my concluding remark.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Mr. James, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, first, I want to thank you again, Sharif, for putting on a great show with great panelists who, as always, I've learned something just by listening. And I think what Donald was saying was, sometimes we need to listen. And I think that's part of what he was saying. And, my concluding remark is basically we have too many walls and not enough bridges. And so when he who must not be named tried to build a wall, well, this is a medieval solution for a 21st century problem. It was never going to work. And if I have things on this side of the wall that people on the other side of the wall want or need to survive, they will come and get it. We will have war. We will have conflict. There's no question about it. History proves this. So tear down the walls. We don't need them anymore. Cooperate, collaborate, and listen to other people. And so I don't care what country you live in. I don't care what language you speak. We're in this together. And I also want to say to the young people out there, if you want to keep playing your video games, you're just another brick in the wall. You've got to educate yourself. Put down the video game, educate yourself. Don't wait to be educated. And learn the skill sets that you need to effect change in your society. You have the power to do it. You can do it. And I'm not trying to change your minds. I'm trying to change your hearts. Try to believe in yourself. Affect those around you, those in your sphere of influence. Lead them. And then who knows where this will happen? Well, this will end. If something happens to your community, it happens to you. So this is the way we have to think, not about ourselves, but in a selfless way. We have to think about others. If other people come to harm, you must feel the harm. And if other people are suffering droughts, you must feel thirsty. This is the way we change. We change ourselves. And then we elect officials who believe the way we believe. And someday, somehow, some way, I believe that the leadership will emerge. If we vote and elect the right people, the leaders will emerge, telling us the truth instead of diverting us from the truth, instead of covering up the truth. And there are so many talented people who are so good at doing that. We need people to articulate in a way that everyone can understand. And if it's, getting on talk radio, whatever, meet people where they're at. Don't wait for them to go to an Ivy League school so they can hear you. You've got to get your voice out there and you've got to lead. And if you can't lead, support the people who are leaders, natural leaders. Not everyone can lead, but support them any way you can, with your vote, with your pocketbook, any way you can, because you can make a difference. Thanks again, Sharif, for a wonderful show.
Thank you, Mr. James Heath, Professor Viva, and Professor Donalds for joining today's sessions. And I just want to add one point, like World Talent Economy Forum, why we develop and why we bring that kind of highly qualified people from around the world. Because it's my understanding, because I grow myself from a small village and I meet with millions of people from developing nations as well as developed nations, because I get chance to go to the Oxford University or Cambridge or example Ivy League universities. But one thing I can understand, like people life may change if they have real hero. So when like Professor Viva become hero for our youth community, they just think that, okay, I should follow Professor Viva, I should follow Mr. James Heath, or I should follow Professor Fred Phillip, or I should follow Professor Donald. That's where actually new generation change. But because of internet, this, that, many things, now let's say many sportsmen, cricketers, or example media personalities, they become hero for them. So they love to dance, they love to be superstar quickly. But We need more scientists like Professor Viva. We need more scholar like Professor Donald, Fred Philip, or James Ead. We need more contributors like Mr. James Ead. That's why we are developing some hero for World Talent Economy Forum. You people actually change human perception. That if I do research, I can be Professor Viva, I can be selected for Nobel Prize, and I can change with my scientific background. And trust me, behind the scene, every day I have to fight or discuss or convince at least 2 3 different corporations or entrepreneurs. Do not expend too much of money for marketing or sales. Spend more money for research. It will help you. It will help you to grow your company. But we are hopeful by these contributions, hopefully we will change. But we need more hero like this. We need more hero for our youth community. We community need guideline. Trust me, in the grassroots level, they do not have. So let's say they are observing religious things and other like other negative things, they just follow it. The negative things they are following. But when they see these positive things, positive discussion, positive dialogue, positive solutions, they think that yes, we have a bright future. So that is actually our objective. World Talent Economy Forum, we want to create more hero like Professor Viva, Professor Donalds, James Ead, Professor Fred Phillips, or all of the 300 speaker. Always we focus on quality speakers. Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we fail, but always this is our dream. I saw from the grassroots level, if they saw, if any youth community just saw that, yeah, if I follow her, I can be like him or her. So I request all of our audience, please follow this kind of people. Try to develop your career like this. Try to be a problem solver like this. Try to become scientist like this. Try to become a think tank, develop think tank, more research centers. I believe that even developing nations do not have economical problem. Their major problem is, I want to say, that good policy and better culture. So I believe with World Talent Economy Forum open dialogue, we can change the culture. We can change the culture that money is not everything. If you contribute for people, this is for everything. And thank you for your brilliant effort and support for World Talent Economy Forum. And trust me, you are actually changing millions of people. So thank you, Professor Viva. Thank you, Professor Donalds. Thank you, Mr. James Ead. I think Fred Phillips and all of the brilliant people, those who contributing for World Talent Economy Forum, need more of your contribution. Your knowledge, your expertise, your experience is valuable for us. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care. Bye.